Welcome back, everybody, for our 2026 Attorneys General Interview Series. I'm Michael Burris, the CEO of the South Carolina Policy Council, and I'm joined today, as always, by our Research Director, Sam Aaron. And today, we are pleased to present the First Circuit Solicitor, David Pascoe. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming.
Great seeing you, Michael. Thank
you.
you.
Also a candidate for Attorney General. So, Solicitor Pascoe, we're going to start off with why are you running and a sort of an introduction to yourself.
I'm sick and tired of corruption in South Carolina. That's the number one reason. I was the special prosecutor during the State House corruption probe. During that probe, I had to face a lot of challenges. Everything from the bench to other prosecutors not wanting to assist in the case, which I understand because they called it a hornet's nest, and they're right. I got the stings to prove it. But despite those obstacles, I convicted and removed from office the Speaker of the House, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, 2 majority leaders, and I sent to prison the Chairman of the Judiciary. Now, I wanted to go further during the probe, and if your viewers take the time to read the state grand jury report, the Pascoe report, they can read just how deep corruption goes in South Carolina. I wanted to go further, but the Supreme Court told me to stop because they said, you're just a solicitor, you're not an attorney general. Well, I'm running for attorney general to get back to Columbia and finish the job I started.
Thank you, sir. Sam?
Yeah, so we're going to get right into it. As South Carolina's top prosecutor in the role, what are South Carolina's biggest crime issues and how would you address them as Attorney General?
There are several. First, as I've already talked about, corruption. I believe that an Attorney General's primary duty is to be where corruption needs an adversary. And that's where I'm going to be. How am I going to deal with it? I'm going to have a public corruption unit that's going to be the most anti-corruption unit in the history of our state, going through every public official's SEI, Statement of Economic Interest, campaign disclosure. They're going to walk the halls and watch the lobbyists, and we're also going to enforce the lobbying laws in South Carolina. All right, so we're going to be very proactive. Second, and maybe even really the top priority, is we have to protect our children a lot better in South Carolina. I'm going to advocate, not just advocate the death penalty for child rapists, we're going to seek the death penalty for child rape. A lot of people don't realize that the penalty is already on the book. We just have to enforce it. Now, I do want to work with the legislature to make it where it's more eligible. Right now, it's almost impossible to seek the death penalty on a child rapist. I also want to get the legislature, I'm going to work with them to pass legislation to have the death penalty as a sentence for child trafficking. We need to be more proactive in both human trafficking, because that's not just sex trafficking, that's labor and everything, and on child trafficking in South Carolina. So those are a couple of the things I'm really going to concentrate on crime-wise. Corruption and protecting our children a whole lot better. Take it one step further, child pornography cases, internet crime cases. This is not any one person's fault, so I'm not castigating anyone. But there are counties out there that have single-digit conviction rates on child pornography cases, where we're only sending 1 in every 10 defendants to prison. We got to do better. This is how I'm going to do better. Those cases should not be prosecuted out of Columbia. I want to give that money to the local solicitor's offices and let the local solicitor, with a prosecutor, an assistant solicitor that lives in that county and has stake in that county, prosecuting those cases, and they'll get to them much, much quicker, opposed to having some prosecutor out of Columbia who lives here having to travel to Chesterfield or travel to Pickens or travel to Charleston to prosecute those cases. It just makes sense. Prosecute them locally, you'll get a much better conviction rate. And if the solicitor is not doing their job, they can be held accountable. They'll be held accountable at the ballot box. So those are some of the priorities that I'm going to have with crime and as your attorney general.
Thank you. Given the current state grand jury, as attorney general, would you consider expanding either their jurisdiction or their powers?
Well, their jurisdiction is statutory, so I can't expand the jurisdiction unless the legislature expands it. I would like to see it utilized more often by solicitors, and I'm sure they would like to use it too with regards to drug gangs and gangs across state lines. So I would like to see that. But right now, the state grand jury is the best tool we have to combat corruption in South Carolina. And I'm going to be very proactive in going after corruption in South Carolina.
Thank you, Michael.
So recently, big news. The House pushed through the JMSC reform package.
Yeah.
Now it's in the Senate. For those of you who are watching, you may not know, this would allow the governor to appoint all 12 members of the Judicial Meritorious Selection Commission. How do you feel about that? And do you think that under the governor's purview of these appointees, things will clean up a little bit in terms of perception of conflict of interest?
Michael, the shenanigans happen at the JMSC level, all right, at the screening level. Right after the State House corruption probe, one of the first things I did is I started speaking across this state about the need for, quote, judicial reform. That was me that brought that up on January the 6th, 2022 at the Greenville Republican Party meeting in front of 300 to 400 people. I called for the need of judicial reform, and I brought receipts telling everyone why we needed judicial reform. The preferential treatment that lawyer legislators get in courtrooms across the state, because not only do they vote for the judges, but again, they controlled the JMSC, which was the screening of the judges. And what you could see happen is, well, we think even though he's more qualified, we want to elect Michael. So we're going to find him unqualified and we're going to push Michael through. You get shenanigans like that at the JMSC level. So I was calling for one thing. And I said, it's going to be easy to do because it only takes a statute, not constitutional change. Remove the legislators from the JMSC. And now finally, what is that? Over 4 years later, finally the House has passed a bill that does exactly that. So I think it's a game changer. I think it's a big deal to at least to start the initial step of having a better process in how we pick our judges and restoring confidence in our judiciary.
Thank you. Just to be clear, if I were to be selected as a judge, please flee the state immediately. To follow up on sort of the perception issue, if elected Attorney General, what is your position on hiring law firms connected with sitting lawyer legislators as co-counsel for the state or as a defendant?
Look, this is why they've been trying to keep me off the ballot, because of the things we just talked about and what I'm going to tell you right now. When I am the Attorney General, every lawyer legislator who is involved in a litigation retention agreement is fired. We did not elect our officials to go up to the State House and make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases, millions of dollars on government contracts and litigation retention agreements. My first day on the job, to help end this culture of corruption we have in South Carolina, I'm firing every single one of them from government contracts and litigation retention agreements. Go read their SCIs. You know who they are. Go read their statement of economic interest. Some of them are not just making hundreds of thousands of dollars. Some of them are making millions of dollars in the last 4 or 5 years. And it's coming to an end when I'm the Attorney General. Period. And much of this work needs to be in-house. That money belongs to the people. You know, we've doled out over $100 million to law firms in the last 5 years in litigation retention agreements. I was a little surprised by that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, over $100 million. That most of that money deserves to go to the people of South Carolina.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Sam.
So obviously the in-state issues is one thing, but also the Attorney General does a lot in regards to pushback against the federal government.
Absolutely.
You know, as the South Carolina Policy Council, we are, big fans of the Constitution and we love federalism. So with federalism in mind, what do you think what federal overreach do you think is affecting South Carolinians the most, and what would you do to address it?
Right now, we're fortunate because we have an administration that doesn't do much federal overreach in the states. So I'm not as concerned as I am right now as I would be under a much liberal or a much more liberal administration, because you've made a great point. While my primary objectives are corruption and crime, the Attorney General is also the first line of defense against woke policies coming from Washington, D.C., or it could also be another state trying to infringe on the rights of South Carolina. And as the Attorney General, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. I want to make sure one thing that we've noticed, and I'm not castigating anyone or taking any shots. I actually think even though I have disagreements with the current Attorney General on corruption and some other things, I think he's done a decent job of being our line of defense against liberal policies. But one thing I've always noticed, aren't we usually number 17 or 18 or 20 to get on these lawsuits? Kind of low-hanging fruit lawsuits. I want to have South Carolina kind of lead the way and maybe be the first state to file lawsuits when we need them.
Thank you.
Great question, though.
So, would your office assume control of criminal cases handled by a local solicitor if that solicitor wasn't prosecuting said cases? And those could be, on a spectrum, or rarely prosecuting. So if we had a solicitor who was barely touching DUI or barely touching human trafficking, would you see a need to get involved?
The short answer is yes. That's my job. As the Attorney General, like we discussed earlier, the Attorney General is the chief prosecutor over every criminal case. I don't think that the Attorney General should go in there and micromanage solicitors. And in particular, we have some great solicitors in the state. But if an occasion arose where I didn't believe that they were prosecuting certain cases the right way or diligently, yeah, we would absolutely go in there and take those cases.
Makes sense, Sam.
So lastly here, what's your position on joining or initiating lawsuits against out-of-state U.S. corporations? And then also with that, where should those settlement proceeds be distributed, to South Carolina victims or to the state litigation fund?
South Carolina victims, but I'd have to look more into those lawsuits to give even a better answer.
Gotcha. I guess the question is really more philosophical. Like, how much of the Attorney General's role do you believe is getting involved with these kind of suits? And I think you've seen it more so coming from some left-wing states where they're it's almost like they're participating in a plaintiff's suit rather than doing something because constituents are actually damaged by something.
Oh, well, litigation retention agreements are basically what you're talking about also. Some of them are very, very important lawsuits, like the opioid settlement that we had, which is over $300 million. My personal belief is we should have gotten a lot more than $300 million. I mean, this countrywide, that some of those CEOs and pharmaceuticals should have been put in prison. Okay. But, and this is where I'm kind of answering your question here. That money needs to be used to help victims in South Carolina of the opioid crisis. What I did not like seeing is seeing lawyer legislators and lawyers making hundreds of thousands of dollars on those lawsuits. And you know what else I want to make sure that we get? Transparency. I want the people of South Carolina to see exactly what those lawyers did for that money, because we're not seeing that right now. We had a $75 million attorney's fee go to just one law firm. Actually, it might have been 2 or 3 law firms, but the chunk of it went to one law firm. Wouldn't you like to know what they did for that $75 million? I mean, that's an easy one. Yes, everyone would. When I'm Attorney General, I'm going to find out what those law firms did for that money, and we're going to let the people see. Because again, that money belongs to the people. It's a privilege for those lawyers to represent the state of South Carolina, and they should be compensated, and they should be compensated well, but they shouldn't be compensated too well to where money's being taken out of the pockets of us, the citizens of South Carolina, for our own health.
Yes, sir. I got one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is going to be a pretty personal issue for a lot of people in the state of South Carolina. We keep seeing these headlines occur over and over again. They're tragic. And it revolves around DUI. We have a horrible, I would say, a crisis, an epidemic of DUI fatalities or great bodily harm in this state. As the discussion goes on in the Senate right now about how to fix this, there's one area that has sort of piqued our interest, and that's resources. And I'm talking about human resources, assistant solicitors at a level such as yours in the First Circuit. So would you support increased state funding for local solicitors to hire more assistant solicitors and to retain current talent you might have, in your office, for example, right now, that otherwise could go, back to the private side, or maybe to the feds? What do you think about sort of that model?
That's a softball question. Absolutely.
Right.
100%. And I'm going to do something, everybody says, Pascoe is always blasting the legislature and this and that. They need to be patted on the back when they do well and they do the right thing. 4 years ago, when I spoke to the Greenville Republican Party, I was really down. And I thought this state was at a crisis point because solicitors and public defenders' offices across the state were underfunded. and we were understaffed, and the dockets were growing even much worse than they are now. We've actually improved the dockets a lot because the legislature stepped up. And I have to give credit where credit is due. The legislature stepped up, particularly the Speaker of the House, and they more than doubled the budgets of solicitors' offices across the state, and in particular, Michael, rural solicitors' offices that don't get much help from their counties. And because of that, I've almost, just in the First Circuit, which is Orangeburg, Dorchester, and Caroline, we've almost doubled the number of assistant solicitors we've had 4 years ago.
And how's that impact feel?
It's great because when you have more boots on the ground, that's when you can win the war.
Mm-hmm.
And we're able to move, instead of my assistant solicitors handling 400 to 500 cases a year by themselves, now they have much more manageable dockets of about 250 cases per solicitor. So that increase in budget by hiring more assistant solicitors is game changer in South Carolina. Same with DUIs. If we get the funding, which they're actually talking about, for every circuit to hire anywhere between 2 and in some circuits 6 more DUI prosecutors, that's going to have an enormous effect on the prosecution of DUI cases in South Carolina. So you don't have these highway patrolmen who do a great job, but you don't have these highway patrolmen and city police officers having to go in there and prosecute DUIs. They'll have prosecutors going in there and trying those DUIs for them.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap?
No, I had a great time. You sure there's nothing else y'all want to?
No, sir. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in today. Solicitor Pascoe, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Had a great time.
All right, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.